Jai Shimanarayana. It is working.
Jai Shimanarayana.
Yeah. Recording is working. Very good. So,
very good. Thanks
for your participation. We continue to talk about the Bhagavad Gita.
Yes, and I think the last part one was really important because I think there were some very key messages that emerged from that discussion. And the first one, at a very basic level, was to read something 3 times. Yeah. And obviously, you mentioned the first time being the overview, reading everything from start to finish, just the translation.
Yeah.
The second time was a more, and the second time was a more detailed review, focusing on the translation with the purports if required.
Yeah.
And then the third time was a more in-depth reading, where you focus primarily on the Sanskrit with the dictionary, with a reputable dictionary beside you. Yeah. So you can understand.
Yeah, we can also switch the second and the third stage. Means in the first passage, first study session is also always the same, because we need. It's important for us to understand the general contents of the Gita. Then in the second, we can also look at the Sanskrit and try to understand. And then in the third passage, we can go deeper and see all the other connection with the other Shastra and everything. But basically, it's not a very different situation. In most cases, the important thing is to first get a clear, complete, panoramic view of what the Gita is talking about. Okay.
Yes.
For this reason,
absolutely.
Last time I was also mentioning that I have been working at the study guide of Gita, which now presently is only in Italian. The English version only has the first of the 3 volumes of the appendix. So the first volume of the appendix contains the Gita Mahatmya, a brief history of the Mahabharata, and the story of Krishna from the Bhagavad Purana. So we know what we're talking about, the context.
Yes.
And the appendix number 2 is the glossary and the bibliography. It means the list of the titles of the scriptures, the Shastra quoted in the commentary. And the number 3 is a guide to the study proper. And this is not a good time. Dalip, if you want to participate to the Gita study, you can enter the room.
Absolutely. So I think.
Thanks, Jai.
What?
Jai. Okay. Yeah. Tell.
Oh, sorry. So Mataji, it's interesting because on our last discussion we touched on the we spoke of chapter 1.
Yeah.
You set the scene for the Bhagavad Gita. Is setting the scene, and then there was the mini Gita on chapter 2, and then we talked a little bit about the subsequent chapters, particularly chapter 3, where the action in sacred duty with the yajna was discussed, and then we talked a little bit about transcendental knowledge, and that led us nicely to perhaps what we're going to discuss today, which is perhaps a subdivision of the Gita. And you sort of mentioned towards the end that there are 4 subdivisions of the Gita. Each perhaps
there are 4 groups of chapters.
Yes, subgroups.
These I have specified in my introduction to chapter 13.
Yes.
Which we can go
and
back
I think a lot of
people.
And I think this would benefit a lot of people because there is this view. Most people, when they start reading the Bhagavad Gita, start to recognize patterns. They started to recognize relationships between the various chapters. And I think a discussion on those subdivisions and how they are related, because obviously Krishna wants to tell us, wants to pass this knowledge on to us, but in a gradual fashion, so that this comes to us in the proper way.
Krishna is following a thread of discussion. So
this thread is really important for us to understand. So it would be great to have your thoughts on these subgroups, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So as you can see from the screen sharing, we have the first group of chapters, the first 4 chapters, excluding chapter 1. So we have 4 into 4 is 16. Plus chapter 1 and chapter 15, which are both quite, outside the discussion, but they're not, they're kind of introductions. Okay, so the first 4 chapters from 2, 3, 4, 5 are talking about the self. I mean, what we are. We are Atman, okay, then we have a duty, we have duties, we are going to be engaged in the sacred activities in order to fulfill the purpose of our life. Then, in order to engage in sacred activities, we need the knowledge, we need to understand what we're doing, and then we need to be renounced. The renunciation, the sannyasa yoga, means to understand how to perform our duty without being attached to the results selfishly. The selfish results, what's in for me.
So is that the basis? Because obviously we have chapter 3, which we've talked about karma and karma yoga and yajna, and then you have chapter 4, transcendental knowledge. What are the emergent points? And yesterday we talked about, on the last discussion, we talked about Varna and how Shri Krishna introduces that topic. When you come to chapter 5, Mataji, that's a chapter which is really interesting because it's easy for people to bypass that. What do you think, Mataji, in your view, what are the key messages that emerge? You've already touched on this on chapter 5, because people then jump to chapter 6, and I'd like to understand a little bit about what the relationship of chapter 5 is between the preceding chapter and the chapter that follows.
So I'm going to do some simultaneous translation from my study guide about chapter 5. Okay, so Arjuna wishes to have further clarification on possible misunderstandings on the concept of renunciation, because in the Vedic social system, a person who enters the order of renunciation is not expected to continue to perform the normal social, professional, and family duties. Krishna replies that the purpose of the sannyasa, the order of renunciation, is not to escape responsibilities, but to become free from selfishness, from egoism and egotism, selfishness and egotism, okay? And so it's always better to continue to perform one's duty without selfishness, but even in the order of sannyas. Now, we are, a note that I'm adding in the study guide, we say, in this regard, we should notice that Krishna is speaking in a particular historical time, just before the beginning of the Kali Yuga. So his teachings are particularly valuable for people who live in Kali Yuga, in which the strict following of the sannyasa rules according to the original tradition is practically impossible, or it will produce results that are opposite to renunciation, because it feeds the ego. Now, in verses 4 and 5, Krishna clearly states that the different forms of yoga or yagya are actually one path only. This is very important, because you have noticed already that many people think that there are different types of yoga.
Yes, including myself.
Okay. Which is exactly the opposite of what Krishna says in verses 4 to 5. So, of the chapter 5. So, Krishna specifically says that all the different forms of yoga are one path only. So, the different types of yoga, we can say, are just perspectives, are just approaches. But it is the best thing is to integrate them all, to see them as one path. Okay?
And Mataji, this is a fundamental point, because you go into chapter 5 and you've got this viewpoint that a renunciate is somebody who literally gives up all worldly duties and just heads off to the cave or the forest to spend the rest of their life
not in the cave or the forest. That is vanaprastha.
Yeah, or literally gives up every single duty. Renunciation
gives
is
everything.
Like relinquishing.
A sannyasi is supposed to be a parivrajak. Means if you, I don't know if you have read the Sannyasa Upanishads.
I haven't, Mataji.
Okay, so brief, spoiler alert. The Sannyasa Upanishads are saying very clearly that the sannyasi cannot have any residence, cannot stay for more than 3 days in any place.
Right. Yes.
And
yes, I've heard of these principles.
You heard that, yeah.
Yes, that a sannyasi must not have cooked food, must not cook their own food, etc. I've heard of these principles.
And they cannot wear shoes, they cannot wear carry umbrella, they cannot teach, they cannot participate in any religious ritual.
Yes, I've heard of that.
Yeah. To the point, and in fact, traditionally, a sannyasi that walks into a samskara ritual is actually bad luck, inauspicious.
It's interesting, because I remember as a child in India in the 80s, you would occasionally get a sannyasa visiting a house, and someone would say, oh, so-and-so is a sannyasa, they're coming to the house, and they would literally adopt those principles. Interesting.
Yeah, well, this sannyasi can visit the houses of the grihastas, but as the Bhagavad Purana is saying when he speaks about Sukadeva, also, there is a passage in the Bhagavad Purana when it is saying, Sukadeva is talking about, I probably remember, are there not sufficient rags in the street that you need to get some dress? Is not your arm soft enough that you need to have pillows and beds? Yeah. And also he says that a sannyasi can go and stay in the house of grihasta only for the time that is required to milk a cow.
Yes. So the point, Mataji, here is that chapter 5 is Shri Krishna explains the fundamental basis of renunciation and clarifies to Arjuna that it isn't the same as relinquishing duty. Would that be a fair inference to make from chapter 5, Mataji?
Exactly. Chapter 5 starts exactly by saying that the true sannyasi is someone who continues to perform his duty without being attached to the selfish benefit, the advantage, And the real sannyasi is not someone who does not light the fire, who does not, perform any duty, doesn't have any responsibility. That is only an external social,
construct.
Not only a construct, it's a facilitation. It's actually a benefit. It's a rule in the sense that all the Vedic rules of the Varnashram system are meant to help us, not to create problems to us. So a sannyasi who is never staying in the houses of grihastas, who doesn't have his own house, who doesn't, who actually follows the rules of the sannyasa, is less likely to fall down.
Yes.
Because and so, the purpose of the order of sannyasa, renunciation, is to prepare to leave the body. If we get too comfortable in this body in a nice house or, good food and whatever, it will be more difficult to leave the body.
Yes.
And even if we die, we take birth again, which is, defeating the purpose.
Shri Krishna mentions specifically that renunciation doesn't equate to relinquishing action, and that is very specific to us in the Kali Yuga, isn't it, Mataji? Would that be a reasonable inference to make?
Yeah, because as I was mentioning, in Kali Yuga, it's very difficult to live like that.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah. So that's interesting, and it's interesting that this chapter he starts to introduce Atman realization without us realizing that it is Atman realization. If that makes sense.
Because sannyas, exactly. But even before, Krishna is also always speaking about, like for example in Karma Yoga. In Karma Yoga, he was explaining the yajna, and he's not just talking about the ritualistic ceremonies. But he says, some people perform yajna by offering material substance to the devas, which is the typical ritualistic ceremony of the Agnihotra or the Soma. So, all along the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, okay, you have a social position, you have duties, but at the same time, you should always be aware that these are just the gunas engaging in the gunas. Because all the material positions, social positions in Varnashram Dharma, they're all material positions. But since we have a material body and a material mind, we need to engage the gunas in the gunas. We need to engage the material nature in the material nature. We need to engage the body in physical, material activities. You understand? So it's all along the Bhagavad Gita.
Absolutely. Do you know what it is? Unfortunately, the translation of the Bhagavad Gita, the idea of renunciation being not the same as relinquishing action isn't always quite clear. And secondly, the pinnacle of Atman realization to start with is action in detachment. But unfortunately, that message sometimes gets lost in other translations.
Because people are made to believe that there are different types of yoga. So karma yoga is not as good as bhakti yoga, for example. But that's not what Krishna says.
Absolutely. There's this viewpoint that bhakti yoga is the quote-unquote highest. And not many people will achieve the Bhakti Yoga. So you're there thinking, well, Bhakti Yoga is something that comes under a very specific set of circumstances. So it's helpful to clarify that. So yes, please carry on. Carry on.
Bhakti Yoga is not separated from any other activity. Because Krishna clearly says, whatever you do, Yat Karoshi. Everything, whatever you do. Bhakti Yoga is not just a particular set of activities that are different from karma, from duty, from the study of knowledge, from, all these things. It's the underlying basis, the purpose of all these activities.
So that's now, we've talked about one key message from chapter 5. What do you think are the other standout points, Mataji, from chapter 5 and how it takes us into chapter 6?
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So, in the verses from 6 to 15, Krishna explains that both aspects, engagement and attachment, means pravritti and nivritti, are required to achieve perfection. This is a very important point. Because, again, as we said, we have a material body, so we need to engage the material body, because if we don't engage the material body, we cannot even keep it alive. So, by material body, we mean the physical body and the mental body. They're both material. So even if someone doesn't do a lot of physical work, they have to do mental work.
Well, again, what you've said here is I hadn't appreciated that until very recently, because when people think, and it's honestly, it's much more common than you think, because when people think that you're not the body, people think you're just not the material body.
Yeah.
You're not the
physical,
anamaya kosha.
Physical.
They equate it to the anamaya kosha. But what Krishna's saying here is, when you're not the body, you're not just the anamaya kosha, you're all the other koshas as well, because that they are the material. The subtle body is the material body, isn't it?
Yeah.
So please carry on. So I think that distinction is very important.
Krishna clearly says that the material energy is bhinna prakriti rashtadha. Is made of 8 elements, of which 5 are gross elements, physical elements, and 3 are subtle, mental elements. So, manas, buddhi, ahankar are also material elements.
So, what Krishna is telling you is that your thoughts may not always be you. Your thoughts can actually deceive you if you're not
careful. Your mind can deceive you,
Yeah. And ironically enough, Mataji, the conspiracy theorists have been saying that for a long time, that your thoughts are not your own, be careful. So that's quite interesting. So that's, anyway, but please carry on.
Yeah, so, basically the point is that all along the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is saying, you have to continue performing your duty, because that is from the beginning. Krishna is telling Arjuna, no, you have to do your duty, or a kshatriya. And it goes on until the last part of the Bhagavad Gita, when it says, you give up all the differences in dharma, all the social positions, all the swadharmas, and you just take shelter in me, but that doesn't mean you have to stop doing your duty. What we need to give up is not the dharma or the swadharma or the duty. What we need to give up is the attachment to that, the identification to that. Because whatever...
It's interesting.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that, because there is one, and we're jumping ahead, but I just thought it'd be helpful just to highlight this point. There is one particular verse of the Bhagavad Gita that is quoted all the time, and that is 18.66, which is abandon all varieties of religion.
Sarva dharman parityaja.
Surrender unto me, and measure and have no fear. So people think abandon all varieties of religion.
But then, but if Krishna meant that, then Arjuna wouldn't have, fought in the battle of Kurukshetra then.
Yes, absolutely.
So the actual meaning in the context is swadharman. I mean, the sarvadharman. It's a plural. That's why I'm saying you don't need to be a big Sanskrit scholar, but a bit of grammar, we need to get. So sarvadharman is a plural, and that means the differences of dharma, the differences in duties. That means you perform your duty without identification, without attachment. So we don't really abandon our duties, or, God forbid we abandon the dharma,
No, it says abandon all varieties of religion.
Religion, dharma is not religion.
Yes, yeah.
Again.
Yeah, absolutely. But you can understand why people then get the wrong end of the stick.
Of course, they get confused, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. So please carry on, because we're talking about chapter 5 moving into chapter 6. Incredibly important.
Okay, so chapter 5 again. We've seen verses from 6 to 15, explaining that both pravritti and nivritti, engagement and detachment, are necessary to achieve perfection. So that means we have to do it at the same time. How we can do that? Because these people who you are, referring to, they think that if you detach, you cannot engage, or if you engage, you cannot detach. But Krishna is saying exactly the opposite, saying no, both are required. So what does it mean that we have to engage in the duty and to be detached from the identification and attachment to the duty? Okay, this is clearer, huh?
So you're effectively saying you engage, but in a detached manner.
Exactly.
So that's the key, isn't it? That's the key.
Yeah.
It's full-on engagement. But full-on engagement, 108% engagement, but done in the mode of detachment.
It is saying, karmanyeva adhikaraste ma phalesu kadachana. You have the adhikar. You have the right and the duty to engage in action. But you don't have the adhikar, the right and duty to get the fruits. And also Krishna says, prakrita kriyamanani guna karmani sarvasaha ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. It's only the material nature that is engaged in material activities. It's a body that is working and interacting with the material objects.
I think Mataji, what you've said there is also important, because it leads me to my next observation, and that is that unfortunately some of the translations, I think, don't do justice to Prakriti, because Sri Krishna mentions Prakriti and he mentions the different forms of Prakriti and Shakti. That hasn't come across in the translations, so it's easy to equate Prakriti to simply being material sense objects. So I'd love your comments on that, if that makes sense.
That's why the chapter 13 is so important, because it closes the second group of chapters. The third group of chapters, because it makes us understand that both Prakriti and Purusha are Brahman. So we can go, for example, here in the explanation qualitativities. Purusha is a personal principle of perception or consciousness. Definition of Prakriti and Purusha are not easy to understand. They become clear only to those who have already established themselves on the level of Brahman realization and have developed bhakti, devotion to the Supreme. The funny thing here is that the more we study, after we read, we understand this chapter that is talking about the vibhaga, the difference, the distinction between Prakriti and Purusha. The conclusion is that they are one and the same. Oops, they're both Brahman.
Yes.
So there is a distinction, as Chaitanya would probably say, is achintya bheda abheda tattva. So the people who categorize Prakriti as material nature and material objects, they're missing the point. Because they don't understand what Brahman is. Because they have been told Brahman is a void, is a false concept, is a hellish concept, of impersonalism, offensive concept.
Yes, correct.
Even.
Correct. You're led to believe that Brahman equates to this impersonal void. So you go down that route. So Mataji, you talked about chapter 5, and again, I'm fascinated how that evolves.
Okay, let's go back.
When you read that,
Then chapter 5, verses 16 and 17, Krishna explains that sacred action, knowledge, and God as transcendental reality are actually the same thing. Sacred action, knowledge, and God as transcendental reality are actually the same thing, which is the very nature of the Atman. So, shall we go and see? Maybe it will be easier.
Yes.
So we have chapter 5.
And Mataji, whilst you're bringing that up, I only say this because you wouldn't understand how easy it is to read. You can read all this, Mataji, and miss the fundamental messages.
That's the point. That's the point. Here, for those in whom Ajnana, ignorance, is destroyed in the perception of the self by jnana, knowledge, that knowledge, similar to the radiant sun, reveals the highest consciousness or identity. Tat.
Okay, so Mataji, whilst you're on that point, could you clarify, this word knowledge seems to come up a lot in the translations. Is knowledge simply meaning that you are Atman in essence, and you are part and parcel of Brahman? That uncovering that is called realization? Is that the knowledge that is mentioned, that is being referred to here?
Now let me answer with the words of Krishna. Okay, from here, that is going to explain what knowledge is. Chapter 13, verse 8 to 12. Now, in the end of the last verse, Krishna says, all this is jnana, and everything that is opposite is ajnana. Now, what is jnana? Krishna answers. Freedom from the desire for honors, lack of arrogance, freedom from hatred, as well as tolerance, simplicity, the act of approaching the acharya, cleanliness, determination, self-control, renunciation towards the objects of the senses, freedom from the sense of doership, as well as the clear perception of inherent sufferings and problems of birth, death, old age, and disease. Freedom from attachment, detachment from all association, including the sense of belonging towards children, wife, home, etc., as well as equal attitude when receiving the pleasant and the unpleasant. Totally and constantly focusing on me through Bhakti Yoga, performing service in a solitary place without attachment for meeting others. The constant awareness of the original soul, the realization of the value of knowledge. All this is called jnana, and anything else is ajnana.
Can't be more clear than that.
Yeah, you can't. You're right.
Okay, so please carry on with chapter on those chapter 5.
Okay, we'll go back to chapter 5.
I'm sorry about the digressions because you're
No, we're jumping. That's why I'm doing the screen sharing with the book.
Yeah. Because some of those terms do need to be clarified.
Oh,
so
definitely. Otherwise, we go into major, misconceptions, and then we have a problem. Okay. 13. Lord Master. Okay, Vidya. Also, this is good. The all-powerful Lord does not consider the merits or demerits of anyone. The problem is only due to the living entities. They're confused because their knowledge is covered by ignorance. Which this totally demolishes the very foundation of all the Abrahamic religions. if you think about it.
Yes, I do. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, then we go on, continue 16. For those in whom ajnana is destroyed in the perception of the self by jnana, that knowledge, similar to the radiant sun, reveals the highest tat param, which that tat is a consciousness, identity, reality, and it is also a way to describe God. Om Tat Sat, right?
Yes, and that obviously, the Upanishads stress that, and they use that as because God is permanent, eternal.
Exactly.
That signifies that.
Tat. Like Tatvamasi, that famous Mahavakya of the Upanishads. Tat Tvamasi. That. Okay. Now, this means that the knowledge, the jnana, is like the radiant sun, and is not different from tat. You see the understanding. That
yes, absolutely.
Those who understand that, tat, transcendence, identify with that, remain faithful to that, and fully dedicate themselves to that, attain that liberation from which one never goes back, because their impurities have been cleansed by knowledge. So, the word tat is one of the most recurrent definitions for transcendence, especially in expressions such as Tatvamasi, Om Tat Sat, etc. It refers both to Tattva and Paratattva, meaning the Atman and Brahman. Gita also uses the definition of transcendence in many important verses, such as Tat Vidi, Tat Artam, Tat Para, Tat Yoga Gamyate, Tat Param, Tat Shinu, Tat Dhamma Paramam, Tat Aham, Tat Param, Tat Pravakshyami, Tat Sarvata, Tat Avyayam, Tat Gyayam, Tat Jyoti, Tat Parimargitavyam, Tat Padama Vyayam, Tat Dhamma Paramam, Tat Teja, Om Tat Sat, Tat Arthiyam, Tat Yagyam Danam Dhamma. So Tat is very important. Is God. Tat is God.
So the key message here is Tat refers to God and also to Atman, would you say?
Exactly, because we're not different from God. At the same time, we are the same and not the same, because we have the same nature.
Correct. So you then
another description of Tat as God is found here in one of the verses that I love most from the Bhagavad Purana, that is described, Tat, or Tattva, is described as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Vadanti Tat. Tattvavidas. Tattvamya Dhyanam Brahmati, Paramatmati, Bhagavat, Iti Sabhyate. So this Tat, when we identify with Tat, remain faithful to Tat, we fully dedicate to Tat, we become Tat. We become identified with Tat. We are Tat. But
you mentioned transcendence, and everyone uses that word. We have talked about this a lot, but could you just sort of clarify transcendence, cross? If you cross you cross some form of boundaries, some form of thinking.
No, it's not exactly a boundary. No, it's a limitation. We transcend the limitations, which are not exactly boundary, because a boundary is something that actually exists. Limitations are a construct. Like, the soil is
a boundary is a
geographical.
A boundary is a geographic. A boundary is a true barrier.
Exactly.
It's a real barrier.
The boundary,
what you're saying here,
which it doesn't exist, in fact.
Whereas the thought that we are the body is not a real thought. Yeah, exactly.
It's a limitation. Exactly. It's not exactly a boundary because it's not actually true. The boundary is something that is true, as you said, But the limitation is that we identify with the idea that there is a boundary. But in fact, the boundary is not there. Again,
the word transcendence has so many sort of definitions depending on who's speaking. Some very elaborate ones, whereas I think the recognition that you are not the material body and destroying that false perception that you are the material body only, that the destruction of that false.
It's not exactly a distraction. We don't need to destroy anything.
No, but the removal of
we just go beyond, because it doesn't exist. Why do you destroy something that doesn't exist?
Yes, absolutely. I get where you're coming from here. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we transcend doesn't mean we destroy. We go beyond. We just cross over and we find out that there was no wall. We can go through the wall because there is actually no wall. It's just our projection.
Yes.
So transcendence means we go beyond. We transcend. We go higher, further. And what we transcend? We transcend the limitations of ahankara mamatva, the identification and attachment with material, limiting material identification and attachment. Because the Atman has no limits.
Yes, perfect. Really, really clearly defined. So please carry on.
Good. Then, tat. We got the idea. Then, until verse 29, that is the end of the chapter, Krishna illustrates the mentality and the behavior of someone who has achieved this level of awareness or consciousness. So we go, for example, The Pandits look with equal friendliness to the Brahmana who is learned and gentle, to the cow and the elephant, as well as to the dog and to the uncivilized dog eater. This is also very, very famous. Vidya vinaya sampanne brahmane gavi hastini shuni chaiva swapakicha panditaha samadarshinaha. This means that we see the Pandit who has the knowledge, someone who has the proper knowledge, learned person, can see the unity of all existence, can see the Brahman and the Atman. Because this is the actual ontological eternal reality. As Krishna was saying, nasato vidyate kvachit. Of that is not existing, it will there be no permanence. What is not permanent is actually not existing as we think it is. So the Pandit, learned person, someone who has the proper knowledge, sees the actual existence. And it sees that it manifests functionally in different bodies, but it sees the same reality. Now, of course, you don't go and try to milk a Brahmana, or you don't go to try to ask, spiritual, religious instructions from the elephant. Because that is a functional difference. But the Atman is the same. All existences are Atman, Brahman. You follow?
Yes, absolutely. And I love it how you've broken down what Shri Krishna is trying to tell us slowly but surely is that he's explaining Atman realization without us realizing,
which is the reality. The real reality, the existence, is something that is permanent. That doesn't mean that the impermanent things don't exist at all, but it means that they don't exist as we think they appear to exist. That's why they're called Maya. That's why Adi Shankar says Brahma Satya Jagan Mithya. It's not that the world does not exist at all, because if you go and bang into a wall, you find out that the wall exists. The world exists. Okay, but it's not permanent. Yes. It's an illusion, because it looks like solid, it looks like a wall, and it feels like a wall, but in fact, even the subatomic physics have demonstrated that in fact it's mostly void, it's mostly energy, it's all consciousness.
Yes,
that's absolutely. The mithya, that is the illusion.
Yes, just on that point, a quick diversion. But a needed one. You've mentioned that scientists say most of it is void, and they sometimes use this word dark matter. Mataji, is it stretching it to say the dark matter, what they think is dark matter, is in fact something else or consciousness, or is that jumping the gun in speculation?
Okay. Everything is consciousness.
Yes, absolutely.
So if you say that dark matter is consciousness, that means that matter is non-consciousness. But that's not a fact.
Absolutely.
Both matter and antimatter are consciousness. But they become distinct in function. It's like the positive and the negative, the poles of a battery.
Yes.
There are two manifestations of the same reality that is actually only consciousness and energy.
Yes.
Because if you get a battery that has no electricity, what's the point of talking about positive and negative. There's no, they're the same.
Absolutely.
So it's all energy. It's all conscious. Energy is consciousness. So the dark matter or antimatter is simply a form of matter that reacts in different ways.
Yes,
in the play, in the dance of attraction and rejection, duality.
And absolutely. And that, Mataji, it's quite nice that that verse that's on the screen at the moment is obviously that's a famous verse of chapter 5 there that comes in. And how does that evolve then, Mataji, moving on, if that makes sense?
I don't understand. What are you asking exactly? Which verse? This one? 5:18.
Yeah, this one's
how does
5:18.
Evolve in which way?
Where does that take us? No, in the sense, because we're taught that a chapter, a verse in the Bhagavad Gita doesn't makes proper sense when you read the verse before it and you read the verse after.
Evolution in the discussion. Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, here the previous verse is saying those who realize that identify with that. So here the Pandits are seeing Tat, because they see all the manifestations of Tat, with equal friendliness, because they see that all these are manifestations of Tat, the Tattva, the Sat, Om Tat Sat.
Yes.
That's the evolution, as you say. And then the next verse, here, again, those who in this very life or body, Iha, here, have vanquished rebirth, Sargo Yesham, Samye Sitam Mana, have a mind that is established in equanimity. This equal vision is certainly pure, means free from all defect, nirdosham, because the same Samam Brahma, the same Brahman is in all that exists. Thus they are firmly established in Brahman. So what part of omnipresent do not people understand? When we say Brahman is everything, yeah, sure. So Brahman is both spirit and matter.
And Mataji, does this extend, because people have the classic picture that's in the Bhagavad Gita of the dog eater, the Brahmana, and you've got the picture of and then you have Shri Krishna in each of those.
Yeah, they have painted the Paramatman because they cannot paint the Brahman.
Yeah, that's right. So Mataji, the question then is that how does that relate to Vishnu going into each atom? So like, say I'm seeing Paramatma. A table in front of me. So the molecules of the table in front of me, is Vishnu in there as well? Basically, Mataji, that is
Brahman is there. Yeah.
No, the reason why I say it is most people, that picture is very famous, and what people get the idea that God is in everyone, but they haven't quite grasped omnipotent or omnipresent because
that's
omnipresent.
Does that make sense? Krishna is saying, all the beings are in me, but I'm not in all beings. But at the same time, I'm in all beings. This is not something that goes on a duality, railroad. It's not a binary problem. It's not a dualistic existence. And we have seen what the Bhagavad Purana was mentioning, that Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan are the same, one and the same Tat. Tattvam Yajnanam Advayam. So you cannot make a difference between the Brahman, the Paramatma, and Bhagavan. But of course, You don't, it's not that if you, break the atom of the table, you'll find a miniature Vishnu sitting there.
No.
As we think that Vishnu is supposed to look at, a mini Murti,
Yes.
It's not like that.
No.
Because Vishnu is not a limited form.
No.
Vishnu manifests.
Yes.
It can manifest and not manifest. This is not. It's not that once Vishnu manifests, it cannot unmanifest. Or if
absolutely, because what people don't understand, and I was one of them, was that when they say that God is omnipresent, that can be in a manifest form and in an unmanifest form.
Exactly.
And the unmanifest form is is when God is present in the atoms of everything, of whether it's a twig, whether it's a table, whether it's anything, effectively. That's what is meant
even
by
in the void.
That's what is meant by
so-called void of space.
Yeah.
In the Akash
that is what is
still a
meant
material
by
element.
omnipresence.
But the point is that people think that once God manifests, he cannot manifest. If he becomes not manifest, he doesn't exist anymore. Because this is what people think when they are identified with the material body.
Absolutely. And I think the reason why I asked you this is because, these verses, Sri Krishna talks about death, and then he talks about the famous one about I'm in everyone from the Brahmana to the dog eater, etc. So you then start to grasp what is the nature of him being omnipresent. But people sometimes don't understand what we've talked about here, about it can be in the manifest form and the unmanifest form. And I think that was what I wanted to highlight when you mentioned this particular verse. So please carry on.
The next verse is very similar to 1854, which I will quote next. It says, this 520 is a Brahmavit, one who knows the Brahman, does not become elated in obtaining what is pleasing and does not become agitated in obtaining what is unpleasant. He has a steady intelligence and is free from illusion because he is firmly situated in Brahman. The other verse at the end of Bhagavad Gita is saying, Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma Nasochati Nakamshati Samar Sarveshu Bhuteshu Man Bhaktim Labhate Param. Tell.
So again, we're going back to Atman realization here, because it's the idea that you must learn to tolerate whatever comes your way, whether it's good or bad, like the change of the seasons, isn't it?
Tolerate, titikshasva, but more than that, we are not confused, because sometimes we tolerate, but we are confused.
The word bewildered. The word bewildered is what is sometimes used in that
exactly.
setting,
we are not bewildered. Udvijet, Parishet, Udvijet. It's the same thing. Nasochati Nakamshati. Someone who has attained the realization, the existence of Brahman, Brahma Bhuta, Prasannatma, is always, peaceful and satisfied. Nasochati Nakamshati doesn't worry so much and doesn't aspire so much. Samar Sarveshu Bhuteshu sees all the beings equally. Like Vidyavinaya Sampanne, Brahmane Gavi Hasini, Sunichoya Svakavacha, And at that point, we can attain the actual bhakti. Mad Bhaktim Labhate Param. Labha means to achieve, attain. Right?
Yes.
So that means that before that level of Brahman existence, Brahman realization, we are just practicing, we're just doing sadhana bhakti. We are not really doing actual bhakti. We are practicing.
And so, can you talk a little bit about that state? So, until you said until you get to that state, you're only practicing, you're only training, but the actual bhakti is when you reach that state. What is that state, Mataji?
That stage is a Brahman realization, the transcendence. Going beyond the limitations of the identification and attachment to the material body and objects.
Yes. Until then, it's pseudo bhakti. It's not proper
Until
bhakti.
then, it's practice. It's training. You can actually have devotion. You can have, that it's not false. It's not false, but it's not the real deal. You cannot say I'm a devotee. I'm a devotee in the sense that I'm dedicating my life, matparayana. But you don't have the sufficient realizations to actually interact with Krishna. You don't really know what Krishna is. Because what you see, if you're still identifying with the body, the material body, and attached to the material things, material body and whatever, you still see Krishna as a limited body. That, like the deity in the temple, like the Kanishadikari, can only see Krishna as a deity in the temple.
Excellent. That is certainly clear. So please carry on.
Okay. So then let's go on. Unattached to the contact with external things, you find happiness in the pleasure of the self. Such a person is engaged in Brahma Yoga and enjoys inexhaustible happiness. Doesn't mean that he's avoiding the contact, but he's not attached. Asakta. Asakta means, okay, they come and go. We have a body, yeah. So we are going to come in contact, whether we want it or not, because the body is a material object. It's an external thing. No, we are inside the body, so how can we avoid the contact? It's not possible.
And again, Shri Krishna reinforces Atman realization in these verses, and then again in the verse you've got up there, again it's reinforcing the fact that the senses are part of the material body, and you've got to see them as being part of the material body, and you are not the senses.
Exactly. They are material, elements.
Yes.
The body is a material object. Even the mind is a material object. Again, as we said before. So, as long as we have material body and material mind, we cannot avoid the contact with the sense objects, with the objects.
No.
So, here, 22. Those pleasures that derive from contacts with the sense objects are the cause of future sorrow, because they have a beginning and an end. Therefore, Son of Kunti, an intelligent person does not seek happiness in them. Doesn't mean that you cannot enjoy the pleasures. It means that we are not seeking happiness there, because we know they start and they end. They have a beginning and an end. And they always come with problems. There is no free lunch in this world. And no free meal. Because everything must be paid. So that means sorrow. So even the fact that we cannot enjoy unlimitedly when we are, engaging with the material objects, we cannot enjoy unlimitedly. I don't know, you like ice cream, okay? Especially in the summer. You know, if I give you one small bowl of ice cream, you say, oh, nice. You know, kulfi, I don't know, whatever. Yeah,
gelato, kulfi.
Gelato, kulfi, whatever, you know, whipped cream. What,
but in the winter.
Yeah, but in the winter, if I give you, you know, 5 kgs of ice cream, that's not going to be nice. You know, especially if I force you to eat it all. You know, that is the point. You know, the pleasures that derive from contact with the sense objects always come with sorrow, and cause for future sorrow, because we eat too much ice cream and we get bellyache, tummy ache. You know, and we ate too much ice cream, or we ate too much spicy food. You know, we like spicy food. Okay, yeah, you know, too much spicy. You know, too hot, too spicy. And then we'll tell, you know, that something will happen then. You know, we get problems. So we can enjoy, but we need to stay in the consciousness that it's just to make the body and mind happy, but it's not our happiness. Our happiness is within ourselves. It's our very nature. We don't need to go out and look for happiness.
Yes.
One who here in this life of body before becoming liberated from the body, is capable of withstanding the onslaughts of lust and anger, is a yogi and a happy human being. So if we understand that the happiness is not coming from external objects, what is the need for lust and anger? Na sochati, na kankshati. Na kankshati, na sochati. You know? So lust is kankshati. And anger is sochati. Right?
Yes.
So, you know, we find happiness in the Atman. Atma Ramas. You know, and then we can really be happy, because nothing will, you know, take us away from the Atman.
So it's interesting, you've got a real evolution of thought in this chapter to the Neophyte.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Shri Krishna we've started off from the concept that actually you don't need to give up your actions to be a sannyasa. In fact, it's the opposite. You've got to act.
Yeah.
You've then gone on to talk about the fact that action in detachment, the two are not mutually exclusive. Yeah. Now you've gone on to see about equal vision. We've gone into what is true omnipresent, what is defined as God being omnipresent, and then you've gone into Atman realization. So it's an incredibly important chapter where there's quite a few.
Oh, it's all like this. All my Gita is like this. It's, you know, incredible. Yeah.
No, it is. It's just there's some very specific thoughts that. There's some very specific themes that jump out when you read this particular chapter, which you highlighted. So please carry on.
And again, one who is happy within the self, who finds pleasure within the self, who finds enlightenment within the self, is a yogi who attains Brahma Nirvana and the existence, realization, Brahma Bhuta, of Brahman, Brahma Bhuta, Adhigachati. So we need to, this is the meaning of yoga. Yoga means uniting the consciousness, you know, with the actual self, the actual consciousness. Finding our real self-realization.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Mataji, how does that then lead to the end? Because I'll tell you why. Because Chapter 6 is a very seminal point in the Bhagavad Gita, and I wondered what you felt about that, because it's a chapter that I think it's a watershed part of the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah, that's why we were saying there are 4 groups of chapters. Yeah.
Yes. So I'd love to know how this moves into chapter 6.
Okay, we are almost at the end.
Yes.
25, I think the last one is 29. Okay, this is also interesting.
Yes.
They have purified from all souls, cut off, blah, 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 blah. Saintly person, completely free from lust and anger, consciousness steadily fixed in Brahman, who have realized the self. For them there is Brahma Nirvana very soon, whatever way. Keeping aside the external objects and fixing one's eyes to internal space between the eyebrows. Balancing the prana and apana, controlling the breathing within the nose, controlling the senses, the mind and intelligence. The Muni, who is fully dedicated to moksha, free from all desires, fear and anger, is certainly always liberated. So we need to, fix on that type of consciousness. One who knows me as the enjoyer of yajna, of the sacred action and tapas, the great Lord of all the worlds, all the people, and the dearest friend of all beings, attains peace. This is also interesting. This is famous. Bhaktaram yagatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suridam sarvabhutanam gyatva mam shantim richati. And without peace there cannot be any happiness. Then the next one, the Dhyana Yoga, the Yoga meditation. So we meditate on the Atman and we meditate on the Paramatma, Brahman, Paramatma and Bhagavan. How we meditate on the Bhoktaram Yagyatapasam, Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, Suridam Sarvabhutanam. Now the next chapter is Dhyana Yoga. The yoga of meditation, how we meditate. So it starts from verse 10 to 17, talking about the yama and niyama, this lifestyle of a yogi. And from 18 to 32, Krishna explains about meditation. From 33 to 36, there is the famous exchange that Arjuna says, I'm sorry, I can't do this. The mind is too difficult to control. And Krishna replies, we know the mind is difficult to control. But yeah.
Do you know, Mataji, I think that the reason why I mentioned this as a seminal moment, because a lot of people get stuck on chapter 6. I don't know why. It seems to be a watershed moment of the Gita where you go in. It's almost as if you've gone to a different. It seems like a very watershed moment.
Yeah, because you get practical.
Yes. So that this is why I wanted us to lead to this one because I feel chapter 6 warrants its own specific
discussion
hour on it because it's so important.
Of course.
No, you know why, Mataji? I feel it's so important because I got stuck on this. Okay. You can read through all this and you can actually think, oh, chapter 6, you can almost bypass its relevance because you've got to be really, really focused when you read it. So before we get to that, Mataji, can you summarize chapter 6 in a few minutes? What are the key? We're going to do a whole talk on this.
Well,
I've got a lot of questions on it.
6,
what do you think of the key messages?
Krishna starts getting practical how we actually can meditate. Okay. And meditation is basically controlling one's mind, training one's mind to be fixed on the conscious and transcendental consciousness. Then
so it doesn't always. So we've talked about meditation before.
Yeah.
But
here we get more practical. Yeah.
Yes.
We get down
but people
to the
always think, when people think, he's talking about meditation, he's talking about sitting in a quiet room.
Yeah, relaxing.
Relaxing. So that's where that's one aspect of the confusion. So I'd love to hear you summarize chapter 6, if that makes sense, before we drill into.
Yeah, well, basically, yeah, that's what I was doing. That Krishna is starting to give, practical applications about the yoga and meditation. And, again, specifically talks with Arjuna about how difficult it is to control the mind. And then to the end of the last part of the chapter, Krishna and Arjuna speak about what happens. Arjuna asks what happens if someone, a yogi cannot achieve complete success in this life. And Krishna says, yeah, don't worry, continue next life. So this is basically, Dhyana Yoga is talking about what we mean by meditation in yoga. Then, we continue. Chapter 7 makes a distinction between theoretical knowledge and practical knowledge. And then we start to talk about the gunas, which is a very important subject. And
Absolutely.
It's talking about theory and practice, basically, jnana and vijnana.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then we go on and on and on, but I think...
But I think, to be honest, Mataji, I think it's been a great discussion.
I think we cannot go more.
But I wanted to sort of get to the end of chapter 5 into chapter 6, because I feel there's a lot of ground that we've covered today. But I think the next time we need to perhaps focus on chapter 6 and chapter 7 requires a proper detailed discussion, because that's when you really get into the heart of the Gita, isn't it, effectively? If that makes sense.
We can say that. But,
very good. But I'd just like to thank you for that, Mataji. It's been an excellent discussion. Are there any other points from chapters 5 that you feel we haven't covered, or do you think we've covered the most important aspects?
If you find some other points, please take note, and then we can discuss next time.
Very good, Mataji. Thank you so much for your time, and my obeisances to you.
Jai Shri Mandarai.
Jai Shri Mandarai.